Ed. Great to have you with us. How are you doing?
Thank you, Dana. Doing fantastic. Um, Getting ready to get super deep into annual planning. We started
Yep.
that, but I always like this time of year. Some folks think about holidays. I think about the next year and the year after. Other than that, yeah, wrapping up a pretty phenomenal growth year for Malbek.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'm super excited for you to share that whole journey because that's really
Mm.
what we're about on this IQ Answers podcast. So I'll go ahead and do our usual intro and introduce you to our listeners. So this is the IQ podcast where we explore how today's B2B leaders are redefining growth and importantly, not through guesswork. So that's what we're all about on this data-driven discussion through data alignment and strategy that scales. So I am your host, Dana Marxer. I'm the founder and CEO of IQ. And today I am joined by someone who truly has engineered growth. So Ed, early, like 15 years ago, I used to call our process revenue engineering. Now
Hmm.
they call it revenue operations. Totally fine. We'll go with RevOps, but I love that. So Ed Breault is the Chief Marketing Officer at Malbec. So under Ed's leadership, I'm going to brag about you and what you've
Oh
done
man.
at Malbec here. So under Ed's leadership, Malbec has achieved more than 50% annual growth, built one of the most sophisticated data-driven marketing engines in SaaS, and as of this year, very recently, earned a coveted spot on the Gartner Magic Quadrant in the Leaders Quadrant for Contract Lifecycle Management. Congratulations, that is amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, we appreciate them recognizing us.
So, Ed has been at the forefront of transforming marketing from creative chaos to operational excellence, implementing OKRs, ABX strategies, and AI-led growth models that have fueled Malbec's rise as a disruptor in a $30 billion market. So, today we are going to talk about how he has done that, how he's created this infrastructure really for hyper growth because it is a science. And Ed, when you and I start talking, we love this science piece of it.
Hmm.
Um, but we're also going to get into some of the cultural impact and some of the innovation that has been being driven by AI in the market today. So let's start, Ed, with just kind of the big picture. You've had an incredible run so far at Malbec. I expect it to be incredible in the next few years as you guys disrupt this market.
Hmm.
So let's start with the big picture. I mean, how would you describe this transformation that's happened at Malbec over the last few years?
Yeah, that's like the right word. It's a whole series of transformations, one after another, sort of continuous transformation. So this idea of organizational capacity for change was either gonna make or break what we did. So yeah, it's very much a culture first thing, and was given permission when I started to actually bring it in. And everything you mapped out, part of my CMO and growth playbook are all those things, right? To be outcome driven, to have OKRs, to run down good process, then technology, then people. So it's also an AI led growth initiative too. There's like three things: efficiency, growth, retention. I mean, that's like the three legs of the rule of 40, now rule of 50 company that
Mhm.
we're becoming. And I want to say just had a lot of, given permission, had a lot of confidence from my board and my leadership team to go run downfield and do all the right things um, and drive the transformation to have a super efficient go to market and then get the marketing flywheel spinning that feeds the top of the funnel.
Well, one of the things that you said that I think is the critical first step is that you joined with that disruption yourself, disruption to the organization to create the transformation. So you had a lot of buy-in that there was a huge appetite at the company for this change, and so that's kind of the prerequisite to success, I think.
Exactly. Yeah, one of the things that when I first started having conversations with the board, the founders, etc., whenever I found out, I'll call it what's inside the brand, my jaw dropped and I was like, this is the future. It just needed to be seen in the market. That idea of um, uh, the next the next era of our category. It's a proper category. It's contract lifecycle management, but we were and they were, when they started the company, destined to create actually a better solution for that category. And it was there, and all I had to do was, I don't want to make it sound easy because it was a lot of hard decisions and sometimes forcefulness and convincing and going out in front and leading, doing it, showing, versus telling. And yeah, we did it. And I think that the unit economics of our business at Malbek is pretty inspiring. It didn't happen overnight, and but we're super well positioned for going after even more of that $30 billion market, growing at 15% year over year. It's a very fun and exciting and perspiring place to be.
Yeah, well, I love it because, when you say I got there to the company and you had all of the pieces, they just weren't put together properly, right? So I love that because you had the innovation to work with, right? So I think that is being able to articulate that in a way that the market can consume. That is a lot of art, right? And I think you saw that. How do I put the pieces together to create this thought leadership position, right? Because getting in the leaders quadrant of the Gartner Magic Quadrant,
Mhm.
it requires that innovative thinking, right? Because the Gartner analysts have to look at you guys and say they're doing something different. They're going to lead us into another path. So there's a lot of art there. So that was all that strategy of looking at what you had to work with and then weaving it together into an incredible story. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I like to say we weren't skating to where the puck is going. We are the puck.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that.
Um,
So, well, good. So let's talk about, I know we wanted to focus on kind of this engine piece in this
Mhm.
particular podcast session. So
Yeah.
you talked about process, technology, and people. So let's talk about infrastructure first. Which is really process and technology.
Mhm.
When you got there, what was the first thing you saw? What was the like, okay, this is what I'm going to tackle first? Because you're right, you can't do it all at once.
Yeah. Um, the idea of scaling was not possible. So what do? Well, you have to put down foundations that scale. It has to do with I call it the revenue factory. It's 13 stages of revenue that start in marketing. Marketing is the leading indicator of sales. Sales is the leading indicator of CX. CX is the leading indicator of successful customers that become advocates for you. So really had to put down, I call it the revenue factory floor, to create this abstract version of the monetizable units that we would bring into our revenue engine to grow the company. Um, so I mapped it down into 13 stages, this sort of conceptual model, because you have all the various teams executing, but everything is connected to everything else. And you take into account cost, time, quality, volume of going to market. And if you ever want to create efficiency, you have to have signals of the business understood. And so if you don't have the infrastructure, the process, you can't signal cycle times. You can't create cycle time compression efforts. You can't increase your bandwidth to up the velocity to deal with volume. So we had to really map out the marketing factory floor, putting the signals of the business, leading indicators, diagnostic metrics, KPIs, lagging indicators, etc. Had to educate. a team to start to think that way, to see our business in terms of numbers, that science piece of it, so that we could make it happen with the, I'll call it the art side of it, which is being creative and defining the processes, being able to handle the edge case, exceptions within our business. And then what that then did, it created the connective tissue to my CFO Rich's financial plan. He's got all his models up here of aggressive, moderate, worst case scenario in case of emergency break glass plan, those sorts of things, all those things that CFO thinks about in terms of, risk mitigation and then also, building and allowing for investments for the massive growth and the scaling growth that we've gone into. So put down that revenue factory floor, connected it to terms that the board, the CFO understands, and then worked with my CRO and my chief customer officer to get downstream alignment as to here's the things that marketing is going to go and do for the company, the enterprise value, the things that we're going to go out and market and bring back to you. Do you agree that this looks like what you want to receive from marketing? And then the same for sales, for CX. So you get sort of this design, you create the foundation for being data driven, setting shared goals, your interconnected goals, and then from there begin to to execute. And we put in a rhythm of the business, like very specific operational checkpoints of intellectual honesty on things that were happening, things that weren't happening, and reporting out on that. So you create the foundation, you put on process and systems, then you have that sort of cultural layer of running the functions.
So, and there's a ton of nuance there about like how, you have your revenue factory floor design, and then actually building that according to design I mean, just that part is difficult. And I'm sure it's gone in phases. Have you seen kind of a, you know, um, talking about the factory floor, moving from, your design to your manufacturing piece, your line, your factory floor, what challenges have you seen there?
Well, obviously, you're dealing with imperfect systems. There's, lack of integration. You need data to start to fill. So it's like data collection strategies. Are you able to get the data? Is the data clean? Does it make sense? Connections of systems, where are you create your technical, understand where your technical silos are pretty quick. Then wherever you have like the humans sort of doing um, like the human integration, you create dirty or or data that is highly manipulated. So you need to, start to get out of that. The more you can get the humans out of the systems, um, in sort of manufacturing of data, the more persistent your data sets are. So then you'll get to higher degrees of clarity and veracity in the data. So do I trust this data? Um, so there's that. Those are challenges. Um, you know, are you collecting the data at the right points in time? Do you have the optimization routines in place to actually action on the data? So there's various systems that you put together and it'll start to collect data, but then you actually have to look at it, act upon it, understand it, create another, improvement cycle on it. So really that um, getting those sort of revenue sea legs under us, I guess I would say, because it's brand new muscle.
Mhm.
You're asking folks whether they were in the team before you got there to drive the change, or you bring folks on the team and they may not have operated that way. You're bringing them into your world, and you obviously have to bring them up to speed, and it takes folks quite a bit of time. So there's the system layer, the data layer, the human aspects of it, and then even like your data storytelling, your narrative that you bring to your stakeholders, having them understand like there's been times when I've reported data and I was like, I don't know that I was as effective as I could have been because I didn't get questions about certain things I should have had been questioned about.
Hmm.
So it's that, right? And then it takes everybody a little bit of time to understand sort of your new data-driven language and why it means value to the business.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I love we like to say, lean in on the systems for the mechanics and lean in the humans on the meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so when you have these strategic minds that are used to collect and put data in spreadsheets and build spreadsheets and what you're building are these chasms, right?
Hmm.
These chasms between the systems where data's out of sync and nobody understands the formulas and maybe it's right, maybe it's not, and then nobody believes it anyway. And all of that time becomes wasted.
And oh no, I gave
Isn't
the wrong data at a board meeting because my formula was broken.
right,
You know,
right. And
you're
so
misrepresenting the business.
yeah, and it's amazing how much of the market still relies on that when we've moved so far past that, right? We have the ability to bring all this data from a system perspective together really quickly, and there's still this perpetuation of the chasms, because people that's the way people have done it before.
Yeah.
But I think you're
I like to say that spreadsheets lie.
yes. Yes. And so, no more spreadsheets is kind of a mantra of
You
ours.
should, is it really?
Um,
You should do like the Salesforce no software, do like spreadsheets with like the
yes, yes, for sure.
get some coffee mugs going.
It really is. And it's, I think um we're going to talk about culture here in a second, but even when you have those minds that shift the bulk of their work from gathering and massaging data to interpreting data that they know is correct. I mean, that's the transformation piece, right? It's like when we're talking about efficiency, it's like leverage the technology infrastructure for efficiency, the process infrastructure and the human infrastructure for actual improvement, right? Like the strategic piece. And but that's hard too. So, one of the things just before we move to culture that I wanted to point out that you said that I thought was so important is, especially on the marketing side, like this is the way you think. A lot of marketing people, marketing leadership has a bit of difficulty translating the power of marketing and what marketing is doing for the organization in KPIs and metrics that the rest of the leadership team and the board values, right? And so
Mhm.
you defining that from the beginning is so credible, right? Because it's like, look, I would never go to the board and talk about views and clicks. Like that
Mhm.
is not interesting, but marketing contribution to pipeline, marketing contribution to velocity, all those types of things that are actually growing the business that you can use the metrics to show that is the seat at the table for marketing. For sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, pretty much every board meeting I get asked about what's going on in your market. I'm like the weather guy. I'm the dispassionate weatherman,
Mm,
you know, to my board. And I think we're going to evolve into culture and how you do it. But I think one of the things that I learned is taking your emotion out of your re data storytelling is really important and like just the facts. And so it's like the rest of the business, your investors look at marketing as the predictor of their investment. So if I'm charged with looking at the market, what's happening, it's consolidating, it's growing, it's these are the monetizable units. I could put a dollar denominated theoretical value to it, and then the TAM, the total addressable market, and then through like intent data sources, total addressable in market, and then the number of deals that are in our pipeline, and then the gap of the deals we're not in, I can have those answers in units. I can have it in dollar denominated theoretical pipeline value, and then it's a we understand what you're and they can have empathy with you what you're up against.
mhm. And I think the two things go hand in glove. You cannot take the emotion out of your reporting if you don't have data,
Right.
right? You can't, like, if you don't have the data, you can't tell that story. If you don't have it in produced in a way that is going to support the narrative, it's like, what else, then it's opinion.
Yeah,
It is opinion.
I've got like these, there's certain terms that if my brain is gonna say them, I stop myself. I think, I feel, I guess, I hope, like all those things, you have to work them out of your vocabulary, because that's where your credibility goes way down. People don't care about your opinion. They want to know facts in data in reality
Hmm.
first, and then maybe some of your, what does your I also respect the fact that maybe you've been in this business for a while and you can sort of read the tea leaves a little bit more, then tell me your opinion. But first, start with the data. If you can't set the playing field on like concrete evidence, you're not going to have the confidence you need in your from your stakeholders.
Yeah, I was just working with another marketing leader. We're in budgeting season, right?
Yeah.
And so we're like, okay, how do we justify our marketing investment and where do we put it to be optimally used, right? And historically, Ed, the that has been such an opinion thing, right? Because being able to tie the actual results of your marketing spend to things that move the business forward, like contribution to pipeline, contribution to closed won deals, improvement in sales velocity. If you can't prove those things, then you get to the budget thing and say, okay, well, 20% more than last year, right? And it's like, why? Right.
Yeah. The other thing that I see, I'll call it a deficiency, is, or a blind spot, if you will, it's having intentions of being data driven, but you make anecdotal decisions.
Hmm.
So somewhere in your mind, you totally disconnect from the data that tells you to do one thing because like your gut or intuition or that one little story that you heard that one time has more weight. So I that's something to be extremely self-aware
Yeah. And I think,
of.
I mean, on the marketing side in particular, we have sales has a target market of one, right? Marketing has a target market of many, many,
Yeah.
right? And so being pulled in these directions can definitely be, I've seen that be so counterproductive. But on the other hand, I was working through some of this data and I saw they were looking at their ABM tools and looking at how are our ad clicks, how are they actually impacting the sales cycle? They just started it this year though,
Hmm.
right? So we're able to say, okay, let's look at that cohort, right? Let's look at how that cohort has fared for the cohort that actually clicked on ads versus those that weren't, or those that didn't get targeted. And the initial pass actually didn't look good.
Hmm.
It was like, I really don't know what this data is telling me. But when you go one layer deeper and you have the infrastructure to do that, and you can say, okay, well, if we just looked at those two cohorts, the other cohort didn't produce as much. That cohort is enormous,
Hmm.
right? You can't compare it that way. You have to normalize it, right? So now let's look at, opportunities per account, pipeline dollars per account. Then you start to normalize that. And sure enough, we started seeing that impact. And it was so, to your point, you've got the data and you can say, okay, let's break this down. I am going to use my strategic brain to say, this is how I want to present this data and then interpret the data, right? Leading indicators are really good. We just started this year. We can only look at opportunities that were created this year that could have been influenced by these ads. And I believe these leading indicators, and we're going to have to wait for opportunities to progress to be able to trust the closed won types of indicators.
Hmm.
That's the meaning, right? If you have the mechanics and you have the data, then you get to spend all your time on the meaning.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the time dimension there too, right? The leading indicators, there's some sort of like time dimension or like incubation process, or you start to bring that in, and then you can get some, folks will be patient with you, in your narrative if you're just starting. And well, it's a leading indicator, but the time dimension of it is, X or Y. So next conversation will have a little bit more meaning to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I knew that Ed, we could you and I could talk about this stuff for hours. I do want to get into the cultural shift because that's hard. That I would say that's probably the hardest part is you can have all of this infrastructure and all the data that you want, but if you don't have the commitment to using the data for decision making, it's like, you know, you're leading the horse to water.
Hmm.
What do you find there?
Yeah, I think there's like this aspirational, hey, I really want to be data driven, but there's like a responsibility that's not always followed through. It's like when I bought my sports watch, right? My Garmin, it gets all this health data, but I actually have to work out to produce the data. Um, and then
Darn
like,
it.
I know now I'm accountable. Okay, so now I'm metered. But now I actually have to look at all the various different dimensions and be super curious of what this data can do for me. So culturally, or like behaviorally, I've just decided to be committed to it, and sort of a high degree of frequency of I look at data, all day throughout the day. When I see insights that are interesting, I report them out like to folks immediately. So before any of like an operations meeting or like our weekly pipeline call or monthly ops calls or QBRs, like folks already kind of get an understanding of what Ed's going to go talk about when he brings data. So you have to be a cheerleader. You have to. I learned this whenever I um, was educated on implementing OKRs, objectives and key results, that there's certain metrics that are committed, which tie directly to the financial plan. When you set objectives and key results, you set goals that are, beyond that. And then you then put a person's name next to the key result that you're trying to drive for the business, and they become the cheerleader. That KR doesn't directly tie all the time to like their bonus or their quota or their paid or fired metrics is what I like to call them, but you give them permission to be a cheerleader for that data point that's super meaningful for the organization. And when everybody owns a piece of data across the business and they're amplifying its performance, you create a culture where folks are sharing, and you get this like intellectually honest culture. You become outcome oriented. You're able to set shared goals, and know you're not just you know, gonna get to an outcome on luck, but you actually have a culture that amplifies and has these conversations. And you go to anybody right there, they could be in product or they could be in CX or they could be in sales, and they have a radical level of clarity into the business.
hmm And I think, we touched on it at the beginning, is that when you're managing to those, right, that it is that exercising that, building that muscle is we're, every week at the KPIs they're right there, right?
Hmm.
We're going to look at how they changed. Um, and it's kind of there is um that it's got to be, consistently led by the data, right? That we're looking at it all the time, that what are we doing to move that kind of North Star metric? But it's also, I always think about when people see what's in it for them, they get on board really fast, right?
Absolutely.
So when we start seeing sales leadership, for example, start to look at their pipeline, not just, hey, I'm focused on the quarter forecast. but then look at their pipeline health, right? And they can see why managing that pipeline health gets them better and more consistent results quarter over quarter. How am I managing to forecast accuracy? How am I looking at things I didn't even know I should look at, but now they're there on my dashboard, right? It's,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, these deals have been pushed 24 times. Okay. Now I've bubbled those up, right? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, part of this pipeline is not real, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't know to look for that or it's not presented to you, it's, it's hard to think about it if you haven't had that resource before.
Yeah, it's easy for sales to be, I call it in the fog of war, deal centric, especially in SaaS B2B like I'm in right now, we're monthly, we're quarterly driven, obviously annual, but to then think about what this means when my pipe pushes quarter over quarter, and again, like that inefficiency that's generated um, without things like more, predictive data driven systems saying, yeah, actually, you got this forecasted in Q4, but you're looking like Q2 next fiscal year, actually.
Hmm.
So systems that give you sort of honesty in your forecasting, super important.
Yeah. And at least reveal where you need to inspect,
Hmm.
right? Like focus here. Focusing here doesn't matter. Focusing here will matter, right? Um,
Exactly.
yeah. So, okay. What else from a culture perspective?
Yeah, I think it's got to be, people say this a lot of times, but it's got to come from the top. You have to have your leaders exhibit the behavior versus sort of you have your staff who's data driven, but if you're not, it's not gonna take hold. It's not gonna catch fire. So
Hmm.
that's got to be there. You have to encourage when folks want to be, data driven, help them along, sort of show them the way, and just be like super curious people. Like you
Hmm.
have to want, like I love getting up in the morning. This is weird, but get my coffee, get on Salesforce, hit F5, refresh, look at all my dashboard. Actually, I'll look at it, any of my notifications that came up from, Europe and while I was sleeping. Um, I just think, coffee and data go really well together.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think we're
Yeah.
both data geeks and
Yeah.
but it is it's critical. I mean, you can see the outcome, right? When you manage it like an engine, it produces like an engine.
Yeah.
Um, so I think I also like what you said earlier around that uh, that linking of objectives through the organization, right? So every participant in this process understands why they're doing what they're doing and what marks success for what they're doing. I've been, and I'm sure you have too, started working with teams where, oh, I think this is a great thing to do, so I'm going to go off and do it. Um, and then it's like, well, how do you know that's a good thing to do? Right?
Yeah.
How does that, how can you, where does that fit in the strategy? And when you can align everybody that way, that's very powerful. And it's not only powerful for the business and the effectiveness, but for the productivity of the individuals, right?
Hmm.
Because then they get really bought in. Then they know there's purpose.
Absolutely. And they can, there's certain folks that are, marketing and sales highly performance based, right? We've got quotas, we've got targets, but there's some folks that don't have performance based plans, but with the objectives and key results, sort of that linking, they can see, hey, that new module I built, or that new that product that I created that put us in the, help us win deals, or put us in, a really good position, like in Gartner. You can feel good about your connectedness to the business, so your work product has more meaning.
Yeah. Um, So I know that we're of course bumping up against time, but I do want to touch on the AI led growth and kind
Mm.
of the future vision. Give us some thoughts on that, Ed.
Yeah, AI-led growth. It's I talked about that the sort of the sequence of things within go-to-market. It's process first, then technology, then people. It's not to say that all this technology is going to displace humans from their process. There's like that thing like a bell curve, right? There's like the standard tasks that are in the middle that are really great for AI, and then there's like the edge cases out here which are really good for humans handling, exceptions. We're gonna see that. Um, the it's also there was like a Harvard study which asked some folks to write an essay first with 100% you know generative AI, one where you can just Google, and the other where you had zero technology helping you. And they hooked up like to see like the brain activity with 100% generative AI. It was like the lights were off, but it lit up obviously with whenever the brain was working. So that's something we need to be concerned about, but at the same time, humans evolve when tools show up. So it's like, okay, before I used to have to send a lot of emails and make a lot of phone calls and do all this research, but I now have AI tools that can do a lot of that for me, speeding it up, making it more efficient. But now I can actually be in a position of overseeing a high degree of activity at scale and making bigger, more like meaningful decisions, in my day. So that's, when I think about marketing, that's what we've done, which is put AI under the curve. Humans scale linearly, AI technology is exponential. So uh, have have a team in place right now who is highly AI capable. It's like this. I call it like this AI like exoskeleton, like Iron Man. Like
Mhm.
he's got the big powerful suit. Versus this is not the right one, like the fully autonomous Waymo car that's out there in traffic trying to like, annoy everybody. So that's the way to think about it, which is keeping the humans in the loop always, um, and having technology go as far as you need it, and then you sort of grab the wheel and step in. So put a ton of that into marketing. We've got it in sales, and then it's pretty much across all of our the 13 stages of revenue that I talked about.
Yeah, and I think that especially uh, leaders who are, there's so much AI promise out there, some warranted, some not. Everybody's saying AI, and I would say probably 80% is not really AI,
Yeah.
from an analytics perspective, at least. Um, as we kind of, I always like to end the podcast with kind of three takeaways. And what would be your three pieces of advice for B2B executives as they're, you know, like you guys, you're disrupting a market in the midst of a disrupted market, right?
Yeah.
So what would you want people to leave with?
I think it's a great opportunity for underdogs to win in the market that we're in with all this AI and disruption. When there's all this movement, like more efficient players can break up the crowd. So there's that. You can't be data driven if you're not outcome driven. So if you don't know how to set goals properly, at discrete points, the data is not going to be meaningful. And then the last thing I would say is that in order to get these changes operational across the company, you can't shut up. You can't like stop talking about it. Like you talked about consistency. the consistent leader will drive change because eventually, it's gonna, folks will have appetite for change and they'll get on board with you.
Mhm.
It's a long game sometimes. It's a marathon, it's endurance. Sometimes you got to run through the storm, but just keep on going, and you'll get there.
Fantastic. Well, Ed, I'm thrilled at your success at Malbec. I'm going to be looking to see more of that success coming up here. Certainly with how you guys are being recognized by Gartner, that's amazing. And I want to have you back here after not too long, and you can give us an update.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on the show, Dana.
All right. Thanks, Ed. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Take care.
Bye.